Hello, I'm Marcia Bruno-Todd, Executive Director of Leadership Tulsa. This is the first of your modules as you begin your training for your board internship, where we go over the anatomy of a nonprofit board. Together, we will learn the foundations of nonprofit board governance, duties and responsibilities of board members, meeting protocols and structure, effective engagement, lastly, key resources and community asset mapping for Tulsa. As defined, it refers to the processes, systems, and practices that ensure a nonprofit organization operates in an accountable and transparent way into the communities that it serves. The importance of effective board governance is that it provides strategic direction, ensures legal and ethical integrity, as well as enhances the organization's credibility with the community. The board's responsibility also includes setting the strategic direction, overseeing financial management, ensuring legal compliance, and evaluating organizational performance. Key functions of a nonprofit board include setting the strategic direction of the organization, overseeing the financial management of the organization, and ensuring legal compliance and evaluating organizational performance. There's three main duties for board members. There's the duty of care, which is prudent use of all assets. This includes the facilities, the staff, the name and goodwill of the community. There's the duty of loyalty. All the activities are first and foremost advancing its mission, recognizing and disclosing any conflicts of interest. This goes for the nonprofit and also your personal commitment to the nonprofit as a board member. A note on conflict of interest. Before you join a board, you have to disclose potential conflicts of interest. And if the nonprofit board is doing their due diligence, every single year that you're on the board, they update that conflict of interest form. What is a conflict of interest? Listen, Tulsa is small and interconnected. I think some people call it SMULSA. That being stated, an example of a conflict of interest could be if you're serving on the Leadership Tulsa board and you have an uncle that has a contracting company, and we were wanting to go ahead and do some rebuilding of our Leadership Tulsa Center. It would be important for you to disclose that you have an uncle in this contracting company, that we might potentially do business with them. Why? Because you personally may stand to benefit, your family stands to benefit from that contract. So really, it's just disclosing any particular relationships that are tied to you beyond your organization that you might stand to benefit. I hope that this makes sense. Conflict of interest, sometimes they may not all surface the moment that you fill that form out in the very beginning, but it is a form that is not necessarily always stagnant. It's something that you can update throughout your board internship process. That's really how this works. So I want to name that to anybody that's confused about the concept of conflict of interest and the flexibility of it, that it is an ever-breathing document that can be updated at any time. And lastly, the last duty is duty of obedience. What this means is that the nonprofit is obeying all the applicable laws of the nation, the city, the state that it's governed by. Also, the bylaws in which the nonprofit has created, making sure that it's adhering to its stated purpose and mission of the organization. Key responsibilities of board members. I think the key responsibilities could really be depicted under three umbrellas. Umbrella number one, setting direction and strategy, which means the strategic plan of the organization, the purpose, the mission, and the values. Umbrella number two, ensuring resources. And that means the board is responsible for selecting key staff, like the CEO or the executive director of the nonprofit, building the board, and also building the public credibility of the board and the organization and financial resources. And then there's providing oversight. That's evaluating the performance of the executive director or CEO, financial oversight, strengthening the relevancy of programming through program evaluation or the services, strengthening the program evaluation of services that the organization is providing, and maintaining the ethical and legal integrity of the organization. I think it's very important to understand that the whole purpose of a nonprofit board is that you are making sure the organization is being good stewards of community resources. This is something bigger than philosophical. It's also maintaining legal compliance for 501c3 status with the federal government. Nonprofits have specific officers in their senior leadership of their board. Now, some of these may change, but for the most part, they include the following. They include a chairperson or a president, and they're the ones that preside over the board meetings. They're the ones that making sure that they're calling it to order, they're calling the votes, and they hold the members of the board accountable. Then there's the vice chair that's supporting the same. And they may also, for succession planning, might be the upcoming board chair the following term. Then there's the secretary. Now, this is very important because again, we talked about being good stewards of community resources for that 501c3 status. Legally, we have to take good notes of board meetings. Any official board business that happens needs to be accounted for on an agenda, or discussions are tracked. And that's exactly what the secretary does, takes good notes and provides them for record for the growth of the nonprofit, but also for audit purposes in the future. And lastly, then there's the treasurer. We talked about the duty of care, and especially when it came to the oversight of finances. The treasurer works with the nonprofit staff to make sure that there's good use of the funds, being good stewards of the community resources, and making sure that the budget is aligned on a monthly basis, or more often, depending on how your nonprofit board meets. Now, before jumping into this particular slide, I wanted to share a little bit about how nonprofit boards differ. I mean, there is no one size fits all. There are certain meetings and procedures and protocols that work in nonprofit boards, but I want to give you the concept of understanding the age of a nonprofit board. There's a concept called quorum, and quorum is the minimum number of board members required to be present for a board vote to be considered valid. That number shifts with every single board, and it's really stated in the bylaws. So I strongly encourage you to read the bylaws to know what quorum means. Second is the concept of Robert's Rules of Order. There's going to be a further module that goes into a little bit more detail about this, but it's a widely accepted guideline for conducting meetings and making decisions in a democratic and orderly manner. And lastly, there's the concept of executive session. And this works, again, with Robert's Rules of Order, but it's whenever a board meeting has to be an executive session, means that the staff or community members cannot be present in that meeting, and it's only the nonprofit boards. Typically, this addresses things like personnel issues, or if they're talking about performance management of individuals or the CEO or the executive director, clearly the executive director should not be present for that conversation so that the board can speak freely. With your board internship or with any board service, there's going to be some bumps along the way. That's normal, but luckily there are resources and ways to address those obstacles. A common obstacle in board service is board engagement. Maybe there's a perceived lack of engagement of board members, whether it's through attendance or disconnection with the mission of the organization, or even fundraising. Ways to address that, again, please note that this is not a one-size-fits-all, but it's a way to start to address this problem. Could be considering a very explicit, structured onboarding process for your board. In this onboarding process, from the very beginning, you clarify the expectations of board engagement. What does that look like, sound like, and smell like? Meaning, how many hours does a board member have to be engaged a month? Do they have to volunteer for a certain program? Do they have to be a part of a specific committee? And what is the attendance requirement for board meetings? The other way is to provide as many resources of the organizational history of the nonprofit to the board members so that they know how to plug in and they know where their talents, skills, and treasures could be best leveraged to serve the organization. Second challenge is financial sustainability, which means ensuring the long-term financial health and resources align with the nonprofit's mission. At the end of the day, a nonprofit can do great work, but if it did not have a plan for sustainability, if it did not have a plan for resources consistently over a period of time, it's not going to survive, regardless of how well the organization is or how well the program is conducted. Ways to address that particular problem as a nonprofit board member is to ask, how do they diversify their funding streams? How do they encourage different nonprofit funders, philanthropies, or private donors, corporate sponsors are engaged with this organization so that they don't put all their eggs in one basket? And lastly, there's leadership succession. And that means that there's the absence of a clear succession line, a clear plan for nonprofit board members for the next leader, or a clear succession plan for the next leader if the executive director or senior staff were to shift or transition. This is very simple. I mean, those that come from my corporate background here, you're welcome to plug in and give your resources on building out a succession plan, which means being very clear on having scaffolded recruitment times for onboarding nonprofit board members, or being very clear and having the executive director of the organization lay out their job duties and inform other members of the team so that they can also be trained or cross-trained on those job duties if there were ever to be an absence. These are just kind of some tips of the trade on how to effectively engage with committees or boards. Understand your roles and responsibilities. Build relationships with the people on the board. We strongly encourage asking lots of questions. Be curious. And if it's not appropriate to do it in the board meeting, schedule a meeting beforehand, whether it's a coffee with the executive director, the board, your board mentor, or the board president, to understand a little bit of what is the focus of the organization right now and the focus for the strategic plan for the board. We also encourage you to actively participate. The real work that happens is in committees. Oftentimes in nonprofit board meetings, decisions are made, but before those decisions were made, the pre-work, the research, were in committees. Those committees make recommendations to the board for the whole board to go ahead and vote on. So if you want to be there at the ground level to understand the discussions that are happening, the perspectives of different members of the staff and the board, I strongly encourage you to engage with a committee. And if you are not sure which committee to engage with in the very first few months, volunteer to go to all of the meetings just to kind of shop around and understand where your skills could be leveraged the most. We also encourage you to seek mentorship. Effective board practice for any nonprofit board is to have a board mentorship program where a senior board member takes you under their wing, gives you kind of a debrief, reflection, opportunities to answer questions you may have, and give you historical context of the organization. And lastly, but not least, consistent communication. I ask you, please, not just as a positive professional reflection of yourself, but also a professional reflection of our community in Tulsa, our organization, Leadership Tulsa, and other members of the board collaborative, TIPROS and Junior League of Tulsa. If you are going to be late for a meeting, send an email. If you are unable to make a meeting, send an email. If you have questions after the meeting happened and it's still percolating in your mind and you're not quite sure what committee to be a part of, whatever it may be, send that email, follow up. Have phone calls with people, but please also have a written record with emails, because as an executive director myself, I can say things can get busy, and those emails are helpful so that we know what's going on, what kind of questions and concerns you may have, and I also know what to expect for the next board meeting if you are able to make it or not. Now, a few questions to ask before serving a nonprofit board. Oftentimes, we just jump in and try to plug in where we can fit in, but this is important as you look through your board internship opportunities that we have with the portfolio that we're going to provide you, or even after your board internship opportunity, whenever you find another board that you want to serve more permanently. Consider the following questions. Wonder if there's mission and vision alignment. Does the organization's mission align with my personal values and passions? Board expectations, like mentioned before, what are the expectations of board members of time, of finances, contributions, or any other commitments beyond that? The organizational health. How does this organization assess its health, its sustainability, and its impact? That's important to know because as a board member, you're going to provide oversight over that. Board dynamics and culture. We had mentioned that some organizations may be a little bit more formal than others. Some may be lax. It's important to ask what is the structure? What is the board culture? And most importantly, this question, I think, is often missed, but how are decisions made and how are conflicts resolved on the board? Please remember that. And lastly, strategic direction. What is the organization's strategic plan? And how does the board contribute to its development and implementation? Right now, there may be a time if you're in an organization where they're on the tail end of the strategic plan and they're in the beginning of launching a strategic plan for the next 5 years. That's important to note. To equip you to be an effective board member, not just here in our Tulsa, but in anywhere across the country, you too need to inform yourself on the unique needs and challenges of the community in which you're serving. So we encourage you to do community asset mapping, which is a strategic approach to identify the strengths and resources and assets of a community. It helps a nonprofit to understand community landscape and tailor their services to effectively serve the community. A few resources for demographic and landscape data of our community is the Tulsa Area United Way Data and Research. The link will be provided. They provide insights into local demographic economic and social indicators, such as the living wage, and what is impacting community members as a whole. Then there's the City of Tulsa's equality indicators, which offer data on equality across various sectors, helping and highlighting areas that require attention and improvement. By understanding the community landscape, nonprofit boards can make informed decisions, prioritize initiatives, and more effectively allocate resources to meet community needs. At the end of the day, we want to help community. We don't want to harm them. So I do not want you all to use the excuse of ignorance when there are resources such as the Tulsa Area United Way Data and Research Arm and the City of Tulsa's equality indicators. Please be informed. There are also national and local resources available to you completely free. I'm a student at heart, so before I jump into anything, I ask all the possible questions and do all the possible research. So we as a team went ahead and gave you some helpful links. There's Nonprofit Resource Center at the Tulsa Library if you want to visit our local Tulsa Library, and their website. It offers free public access to tools for forming a nonprofit, funding opportunities, grant writing, and just learning about philanthropy as a whole. Then there's Candid Learning. It provides on-demand training, webinars, and professional literature for nonprofits. There's the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and those that are serving on the fundraising committee or development committee, they provide some resources for that as well. Idealist, a platform for searching nonprofit jobs and also for posting nonprofit board internship opportunities. There's the National Council for Nonprofit, which is guidance and resources for advocacy of nonprofit organizations for across the country of the United States. This is a go-to guide if you need maybe a template on writing bylaws or updating bylaws for your organization or updating a giving policy for your organization. They have some great templates available for you. Then of course, locally, we have the Oklahoma Center for Nonprofit, and they are set up to equip and strengthen Oklahoma's nonprofit sector through training, consulting, and advocacy and membership. There's BoardSource that also provide training and free resources that you can plug and play and adapt to whatever's happening in your nonprofit. Last but not least, it's us, Leadership Tulsa, where we do have programs like this, but please check in with us as we serve as your coach, your mentor, and support in your nonprofit board internship experience. Key takeaways. Understanding roles, responsibilities, and best practices for nonprofit board governance is crucial for organizational success. Please take this seriously. You are a steward of community resources. Knowing that, I encourage you to engage with your resources that are available. New board members should actively engage and utilize available resources to contribute meaningfully to their organizations. Ask questions, speak up. There will be challenges, but there's also solutions. Being aware of common governance challenges and their solutions can help you as a board member navigate these obstacles effectively. Local and national support. There's a wealth of resources available to you. You do not have the excuse to say that you were not told. We have offered you resources available on this particular module, but there's also so many across the country and locally here in Tulsa. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your willingness to lean in and learn about nonprofit board governance. I look forward to your internship opportunity that you will have, as well as you also navigate the following modules. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to Leadership Tulsa at leadershiptulsa.org or visit and follow us on our social media. Thank you.